Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 here on Broadcasting Scotland. My name's Kenny McBride and I'm joined from home this evening by our good friend Chris McCusker. Chris, how are you this evening?
How are we, Kenny?
I'm not bad at all, Chris. Are you keeping well?
Yeah, well, I was feeling a wee bit under the weather at the start of the week, but yeah, I've bounced back, so all good.
Well, that's good news. As of 2 p.m. today in Scotland, there have been a total of 17,007 tests for the coronavirus concluded. Of these, 14,697 tests were confirmed negative and 2,310 tests were positive. This marks an increase of 317 confirmed cases since yesterday. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus infection has sadly risen to 76. The latest UK figures available show that 2,352 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have died from their illness. A total of 152,979 people have been tested, of whom 123,505 were confirmed negative and 29,474 were confirmed positive. Today marked the biggest daily rise in deaths across the UK to date, with 563 people losing their lives to the virus in the last 24 hours. At Holyrood, the Scottish Government's emergency coronavirus bill has been working its way through Parliament today. Original plans were for all stages of the bill's progress to be completed today, and debate continues as we speak, much later than the usual closing time at Holyrood, with that goal in mind. Following criticism from the legal profession, including from some people inside the SNP, plans to suspend jury trials during the coronavirus crisis were set aside, as were plans relaxing the rules on freedom of information requests. The Scottish Government has significant concerns about extreme delays in the justice system as the crisis stretches on and more cases pile up waiting to be heard. The Minister responsible for the bill, Michael Russell MSP, has promised to discuss the matter further with concerned parties and bring new legislation back to Parliament soon. The bill contains important measures to help protect tenants from eviction during the crisis and preventing creditors from taking action against their debtors for this period too. It also provides rules for the early release of prisoners if infection rates amongst staff make the safe management of prisons impossible, as well as other regulations allowing courts to conduct some business, including procedural hearings, via the internet. All of the regulations in the bill will automatically end after 6 months. They can then be renewed by Parliament if necessary, but only up to a total of 18 months. At that point, new legislation would be necessary. And Chris, as we came on air there were still some various amendments being discussed, so we're not sure exactly when this whole process is going to be over. But what do you think of this bill today overall?
Well, I was actually the viewers might be quite taken aback when I say that I was quite taken with Alex Cole-Hamilton's suggestion of using cinemas as sort of like courtrooms. You know, just for the actual sheer scale of the cinema, then you could actually have a jury that was well spaced out and in a controlled environment so that the cases could go ahead. I thought it was quite a credible idea, to be fair to you.
Well, it's a first when you've got something positive to say about Alex Cole-Hamilton. This virus is bringing out the best in an awful lot of people. I would take it then that you are pleased that the jury trials thing has not passed today.
Yeah, I think it was a knee-jerk reaction, and we saw, if we go back a couple of years, the Scottish Government put a knee-jerk reaction to the Anti-Behaviour Football Act, which I think was just a sticking plaster on quite a porous wound, to be honest with you. It needs that kind of legislation needs real proper scrutiny, and I don't think that I don't think proper scrutiny was given on that particular subject.
Yeah, it did seem to have kind of taken some people aback a wee bit. It seemed like there hadn't been any even much private consultation kind of behind the scenes.
Sorry to cut across you there, Kenny.
No, go ahead.
No. I mean, what I'm saying is similar to the OBFA Act. It was rushed through, and there wasn't an awful lot of work done on it. I think they came to a conclusion that they had to do something and had to do something quick. I'm actually quite pleased about it.
Yeah, and I take it you would be welcoming the news that, for example, tenants will have to be given much longer notice periods if they're going to be evicted, and this action preventing creditors from taking action against people who've fallen behind on debts as well.
You can read me a little book, Kenny. Because I was particularly taken with the Greens were very strong on the rights of students, where predominantly there's quite a lot of students that are in rented accommodation, obviously. I mean, nobody wants to see anybody out on the street, period. That's, whether we're dealing with coronavirus or not. And it was interesting to see that moves are still being made to try and get the homeless off of the streets as well. And I think that should be a piece of work which could hopefully grow arms and legs and make sure that they stay off the street. Because if you take them off the street now and give them accommodation, then whilst they're in that accommodation, then, can we put the infrastructure in place so that it could then lead to something more, permanent
further down? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's been. This is something we discussed a wee bit on the show last night with Ellen Hofer was here, and we talked a wee bit about the homelessness issue. If we're able to get people off the streets temporarily during a crisis like this, then clearly there's places to put most of them, and we can do a lot more once the crisis is over.
Well, yeah, and again, Andy Whiteman made the point that the council should have the required legislation if it means taking on compulsory purchase orders for use of social rent. So if those properties were quickly identified, then those properties that are purchased in compulsive purchase orders should be of at least a 5 or a 10-year lease going forward for the social housing sector. We know that some of the homeless people have got complex issues. Some of the homeless people are not able to integrate into society, and some of them will fall through the cracks. But we shouldn't give up on them and give up on the house as well, or should I say the accommodation at the same time.
Yeah. Anyway, in other news at Holyrood today, Climate Change Secretary Rosanna Cunningham has announced that the Scottish Government will not be publishing the Climate Change Plan update at the end of April. This decision has been taken in light of the coronavirus outbreak. Ms Cunningham said, "The Scottish Government is fully committed to tackling the global climate emergency and to updating the Climate Change Plan to reflect our ambitious net zero targets. However, in face of the unprecedented health and economic implications of the COVID-19 pandemic, we have come to the view that publishing the Climate Change Plan update by the end of April is no longer feasible or appropriate. This does not mean that work on our ambitious plan will pause. Indeed, it will continue. But it is recognition that we are operating in a changed landscape. It is vitally important that our actions in the coming weeks and months even those in response to other major global issues such as climate change, reflect the worldwide situation and support our national response. I have written to the Committee on Climate Change to request its independent expert advice on the best way forward in these unprecedented circumstances and how the climate change update can contribute in due course to a green recovery for Scotland. And obviously this is disappointing given that Scotland's climate change targets have been world leaders. Rosanna Cunningham there stressing that the work does carry on, it's just that we're not going to get quite the same kind of updates on it. What do you think about this announcement today?
Yeah, well, again, it's we have to be getting on with business as usual. Dare I say, getting on with the day job. Obviously, the main task in hand at the moment is coronavirus, so it's all about rejuggling the business order of the Parliament going forward, and obviously we have to prioritise what is essential, which is the coronavirus, and that's not belittling the work that we're doing on climate change. Rosanna quite clearly said that the work will be ongoing. It's just that the coronavirus taking basically top billing, then reporting on the actual work of the climate change, then it has to unfortunately take a back seat.
And she mentioned this idea of a green recovery in that quote we had from her. We've seen obviously a massive shutdown in airline traffic over the last month or two. We've seen obviously a lot of people commuting a lot less because they're able to work from home. Do you have much hope that some of these changes that we've seen, which have slashed carbon emissions in a lot of sectors, do you have any hope that we'll be able to maintain some of those carbon reductions after the crisis is over?
Well, it depends on how the aviation business recovers from this. Quite clearly, the lack of aircraft in the skies at the moment, you're not seeing those air trails over the sky, in recent weeks. And that's obviously due to the significant drop in air traffic. And thus, therefore, they're not emitting the same fumes. So, I don't see the aviation industry bouncing back automatically. It's going to be a gradual climb back to what they used to be. So, if there's one benefit to come out of coronavirus, then you would say that at the moment the air quality is, as best as it's ever been in the last 300 years.
Yeah, we have to, I suppose, take those small benefits where we can and be happy for whatever small benefits we can get. Anyway, in other news at Holyrood, Social Security Secretary Shirley-Anne Somerville has updated Parliament on the impact of coronavirus on social security services in Scotland. The majority of Social Security Scotland staff are now working from home to support efforts to slow the spread of the COVID-19 disease. The delivery of existing benefits continues, with applications being received, processed, and payments being made. On benefits due to be introduced from this year, the Cabinet Secretary advised that although they were on track to deliver these benefits, plans have had to change as a result of the ongoing pandemic. The Scottish Government, the DWP, local authorities, and health and social care practitioners, who are all required to develop and deliver these benefits, are currently focused on the response to and recovery from COVID-19. As a result, the introduction of child disability payments and the Scottish Government's replacement for personal independence payments will be delayed. UK ministers have agreed that they will continue to deliver disability benefits to Scottish clients over a longer transition period. The Scottish Child Payment, which was due to be introduced from this autumn, will also be delayed. The Scottish Government will focus its resources to deliver this as soon as practically possible. The aim is to start taking applications by the end of 2020, with payments being made from 2021, subject to sufficient staff being in place. And Chris, this is another case where the business of government has kind of had to slow down because so many workers are engaged in doing other work, or because people are working from home and things are just becoming a bit more complicated to navigate. What do you make of these announcements from Shirley-Ann Somerville?
Well, we have to take into consideration that the DWP are being, frankly, overwhelmed by the amount of claimants who are now trying to get onto universal credit in order to get their 80% furlong from the government. Mm-hmm. So, here's another new one for you, Kenny. I've got a bit of sympathy with the DWP.
Yeah.
And I never thought I'd hear me saying that. But there does seem to be a certain amount of ambiguity surrounding the whole issue of universal credit. As in who qualifies for what, and does that qualification allow you to access X, Y, and Z? So it seems to me that once again, Scotland is having to wait on the DWP, which is centralised in London, obviously. Mm-hmm. We're having to wait on their sort of like whim, or when they are able to catch up with the legislation that was put in place by Richie Sunak.
Yeah.
So naturally it is going to be a bit slow, and things are going to have to take a back seat. That's scant consolation to people who are trying to access cash money at this moment in time.
Yeah.
I'm by no way being complacent. I've lost my job, so I'm one of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is very difficult. I think the whole social security system UK-wide has kind of been overwhelmed by this huge rush of people trying to claim for unemployment. But on the plus side, these, for example, the disability benefits that the Scottish Government is due to take over, we are at least seeing the DWP kind of suspending assessments and stuff for people who are on those payments. So there is a wee bit of a reprieve there. It's not the worst possible situation, which is for these people just to have been abandoned to the system as it was from the DWP. And there is hope, obviously, from everything we've seen from Shirley-Ann Somerville. She seems a very capable minister, and I'm sure she's working flat out to try and make this all happen as quickly as possible.
Yeah, no, I mean, she actually is. I've had many a conversation with Shirley-Ann regarding benefits, and previous to that, obviously, it was Jean that was in charge, Jean Freeman, and she was absolutely spot on. So Shirley-Ann's taken up the baton and ran with it. But this would have been the ideal time for the UK government to say, look, we've got enough problems as it is. Why don't you have all your benefits and you sort that out? Seeing as how we are all in this together, we are part of this 4-island coalition.
Yeah.
And that would have been the ideal time for them to pass the baton on and give us the Barnett consequentials in order to deal with it.
Yeah.
There'd been one less headache for the DWP to deal with.
Yeah. You mentioned Jean Freeman there though, and she did have some news today as well. The new NHS Scotland medical facility being created at the Scottish Events Campus in Glasgow is to be called NHS Louisa Jordan. Health Secretary Jean Freeman announced the temporary hospital will be named after Sister Louisa Jordan, a First World War nurse, who died on active service in Serbia in 1915 while providing much-needed care to an area of dire need as part of the Scottish Women's Hospitals for Foreign Services. Born in Maryhill in Glasgow, Louisa Jordan signed up to the war effort in December 1914 while working as a Queen's nurse in Fife. She is commemorated on the Buckhaven War Memorial and at Wilton Church in Glasgow. The people of Serbia gather each year to commemorate the courage and sacrifice of Sister Jordan and her colleagues. So coming on top of the Nightingale Hospital in London, we've now got the Louisa Jordan facility in Glasgow. What do you make of this announcement, Chris?
I'm actually really happy about it, Kenny, because I didn't want the UK government to name the hospital. I wanted the hospital to be quintessentially Scottish. I wanted it to reference the fact that it's our Scottish NHS, and it's actually good to see that we are actually recognising someone who unselfishly dedicated herself to treating the wounded. I ran a poll on Twitter today before the announcement came out, as to what the name should be. It was quite weird and wonderful. If you want to have a look, folks, it's Nicola's number one comrade. There was some really, really great suggestions, and then there was obviously some really quite bizarre suggestions as well. One I think I recall was actually to call it the Death Star, which I didn't think was in very good taste. But an awful lot of people, obviously, they were going on the Independence sort of like name and Braveheart and all the rest of it. But I think they've actually settled on a really good name, a really good cause, and it's got a real good meaning to it. Rather than the Nightingale thing, it's got it had that overarching echo of the war years, when Britain was great and all the rest of it. It was rather quite predictable that they would call it that. But it was George Adam actually asked the FM at FMQs today about the name, and that's where Jean announced it. Yeah, so quite pleasing.
Yeah, well, I had my money on Hospital McHospital face. I'm kind of surprised we didn't end up with that. But anyway, also in health service news, NHS staff have helped boost the stock of ventilators, crucial for the care of those suffering from the coronavirus infection, by repurposing more than 200 anaesthetic machines. These machines, normally used in operating theatres out with intensive care units, will supplement the stock of specialised intensive care ventilators. NHS boards will deploy them as an interim measure, with staff currently being retrained to use them in this way. The use of repurposed machines increases ICU bed availability to more than 500. More ventilators for the NHS in Scotland have been ordered from a range of manufacturers, and these are expected to arrive in the next few weeks. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon said, "Expert NHS clinicians, medical physicists and technicians have worked tirelessly, particularly over the last few days, to increase the ventilation capacity in our NHS by repurposing anaesthetic machines in response to COVID-19. Their remarkable work means our NHS has not just doubled ICU capacity, but has tripled it, ahead of the arrival of the additional ventilators we have ordered. We are now working to quadruple ICU capacity for COVID-19 patients to beyond 700 ICU beds as soon as that can be achieved. These measures are part of our concerted and sustained response to an unprecedented health emergency. I am deeply grateful to our NHS staff for their ongoing commitment, expertise and bravery during this outbreak." And Chris, this is another example of technology getting put to maybe a use that hadn't quite been expected for it, but it's got to be good news that we've managed to triple intensive care capacity just in the last few weeks.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's welcome news, and again, or should I say, once again, Scott Innovation champions the moment. Thing, mate, I was really quite disturbed. I read a piece, I think it was in the Guardian, that Matt Hancock had actually stolen some of the 8,000 ventilators that were earmarked for the devolved competencies. Uh, you, you, I don't know what credibility there is to that story, but it's worth pointing out that the 8,000 that was announced by the UK government, I was led to believe that that was 8,000 for the UK, and each country was going to get its proportionate fair share. And judging by this piece, as I say, I think it was in the Guardian, suggests that that's not the case.
Some of the things which are in this bill are there
because of. Sorry about that, Chris. Go on.
Yeah. So I would happily be corrected if that's not the case, that we're not getting a share of the 8,000 ventilators that was suggested by Matt Hancock earlier on in the week.
Yeah, well, I have to say I've not heard that. I didn't see that article, so I can't comment on that. That's all got an allegedly on it. I'm sure if it is a story, Gordon will be discussing it tomorrow night. But we are going to move on now to some sad news. Edinburgh's 5 August festivals, which were due to welcome audiences of more than 4.4 million people and 25,000 artists, have in effect been cancelled. The Fringe, the world's biggest arts festival, today joined with the city's Book, Art and International Festivals and the Military Tattoo to announce that the plug was being pulled on preparations for this year. Shona McCarthy, the chief executive of the Fringe Society, said the decision had not been taken lightly. She also held out hope that they would find ways of uniting people under a Fringe umbrella. It's too early to say what this will look like, she said, but we are confident that as a collective we can find a way to reach through the walls that currently surround us and inspire, cheer and connect. McCarthy said registration fees, tickets and memberships would all be refunded. The First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, described the cancellation as a heartbreaking decision but the right one, and promised to work with the festivals to ensure they returned even stronger next year. Because the Fringe is an open access event, the governing Fringe Society cannot formally cancel it in the same way other festivals can, but it can recommend that the many venues and participants stop their planning and refund deposits and tickets. No one knows what the UK will be like in August, but it was becoming increasingly clear that the huge, expensive operation going on at the moment to prepare for the Fringe could no longer continue. Last year, the festivals were estimated to have generated £1 billion of commerce in the capital. And Chris, I don't know how much of a fan you are of Edinburgh and festival season, but what do you think about this announcement that the festivals aren't going ahead?
Well, I'm not as an ex-thespian and lovey of the boards. I'm kind of ambivalent on this, because it's there are pros and cons either side. There are some people that are saying that the Edinburgh Festival has got too big for its boots. And that's mainly obviously people who reside in the surrounding area. I know that my son used to live in that area in Marchmont, and he used to work in the Cameo Theatre just down from the Grassmarket, I think. Mm-hmm. So he always had trouble getting to work, and he said it was an absolute riot. It was a complete nightmare. So I think the people of Edinburgh have sort of like witnessed this beast grow arms and legs, and some of them think that it's grown too big for it. And there was calls last year to spread it further out to encompass Leith, where there's a bit more room. Well, to see if
Just to spread it out a bit more, yeah.
you were just feel but in saying that, the actual revenue that that you cited, Kenny, that's actually eye-watering. I didn't think for a second that it actually took in so much. But maybe this will, again, very much like what we were talking about, the aviation industry. Maybe it will start on a smaller scale again, and that might allow. It might allow the company that runs it, Underbelly, who are
Like that. I mean, that is just one venue, the Underbelly.
But it's just one company. Let's put it this way: they have been known to play fast and loose with the employment laws.
Yeah, there have been a lot of criticisms of the Fringe, obviously, and the festivals in various ways, but this is still obviously going to have a huge impact on hotels, pubs, restaurants, all the hospitality stuff that goes on. All of these things is going to have a huge impact on Edinburgh. Although, as you say, I'm sure a lot of people who work in Edinburgh will be delighted at the chance to actually get to their work on time throughout the month of August. And on other big cancellation news, though, Wimbledon, one of the centrepieces of the British summer sporting calendar, has been cancelled due to the coronavirus pandemic. The All England club confirmed today. This marks the first time the tournament will not be held since the Second World War. The championships were scheduled to run from the 29th of June until the 12th of July, but as tennis officials prepared for emergency talks this week, cancellation swiftly became unavoidable. Unlike one-day sporting events, Wimbledon functions more like a festival held over 2 weeks in the huge All England Lawn Tennis Club, which contains some 40 tournament and practice courts occupied by competitors and staff throughout the tournament. Wimbledon requires at least 2 months of preparation before the event, which is incompatible with the government's current lockdown and guidance on social distancing. As players reacted to the announcement, attention particularly focused on the two most successful players in Wimbledon history, Roger Federer and Serena Williams. Both were finalists in 2019, and at 38 years old will not have many more opportunities to win another Wimbledon title. Devastated, wrote 8-time Wimbledon champion Federer on Twitter, and I'm shocked, posted Williams. This is a decision we have not taken lightly, and we have done so with the highest regard for public health and the well-being of all those who come together to make Wimbledon happen, the All England Club chairman Ian Hewitt said in a statement. After January's Australian Open and Roland Garros in May, Wimbledon traditionally marks the third major in the tennis calendar. Last month, the spring clay court season was scuppered after the French Tennis Federation blindsided the other major tennis stakeholders, the ATP, WTA and ITF, by unilaterally shifting Roland Garros from its intended 24th of May start to the 20th of September, just a week after the US Open is due to end on the 13th. As grass is only a viable playing surface during spring and summer months, postponement was not a realistic option for Wimbledon. And Chris, I think a lot of people saw this one coming, but it's still going to hit quite hard. All the tennis fans out there, that Wimbledon won't be happening this year.
Yeah, well, I mean, not being a lover of public school sports anyway, it's of no great loss to me, that's for sure. The one obvious loss is of the soft fruit industry, which provides the copious amounts of strawberries. But at the end of the day, we don't have anybody to pick them because of the migration laws, and also the fact that we're operating a social distance. So. I think we're kind of scuppered on that front. But the point that I wanted to make was that It sounds a wee bit like a touch of the poor me's on and I hate this use of the inverted comma word all England club. What's
Yeah.
that mean to mean? If Andy Murray's playing in it, why is it called an all England club? If
Aye,
it's
well.
everyone, why is it still call it the all England club?
Well, that's where it all happens, isn't it, Chris? I mean, just to be fair, though, you said it was a private school sport. Andy Murray did not go to a private school. He went to Dunblane Primary and Dunblane High, like every other Wayne in Dunblane. Now, it's a very good school. I will admit, it looks a wee bit like a private school. Sounds a wee bit like it if you heard some of those Dunblane accents, but. But it is a public school, and he's one of the best in the world. I mean, it's a real shame for him as well. He's been battling back to get to some sort of level of fitness where he could compete at that high level again. And this is going to be another year where he's just not going to have the chance to compete like that.
Yeah, I can see that point, and I take it on board. But as I say, not being a lover of public school sports, I'm more looking forward and more concerned about, will Liverpool and Celtic be able to finish off the respective leagues?
Yeah, it's going to be heartbreaking to you if those two have to have a wee asterisk beside them, won't you? Won't it? That'll just break your heart.
I think it'd be heartbreaking for anyone, because at the moment, on a serious point, I think Anne Budge, and I'm no lover of Heart of Midlothian, but Anne Budge has got a serious gripe with the SFA, because it looks like she's going to have to concede the fact that her club will go down. Now, the financial implication for that particular club, if that does so happen, is absolutely humongous. Hearts can't afford to go into the first division; they just simply can't. And that day, if Edinburgh's got to lose one of its clubs.
Yeah, it's a tough time for all sorts of sporting organisations just now. This is one of those things that we're just going to have to keep an eye on as the weeks and months roll on. But we have to move on now. And we move to a country we haven't discussed a great deal for a wee while, Brazil. And Brazil's president, Jair Bolsonaro, is facing a growing backlash over his handling of the coronavirus crisis, with the state governors responsible for more than 200 million of the country's 210 million people refusing to follow his commands over the pandemic. Bolsonaro has repeatedly played down the dangers of COVID-19 and last week urged Brazilians to get back to work, in defiance of advice from the World Health Organization and his own health ministry. His approach, though, has been largely ignored by politicians and the general public. Just 3 of Brazil's 27 states, home to just 5.7 million people, have relaxed social isolation measures as coronavirus cases continue to rise. Brazil now has 5,717 confirmed cases and 201 deaths. A study showed that almost 60% of Brazilians are staying at home. João Doria, the governor of Brazil's most populous and economically prosperous state, São Paulo, has maintained a strict quarantine and this week openly defied Bolsonaro, telling its 44 million citizens, do not follow the guidance of the president. Wilson Witzel, Rio de Janeiro state's right-wing governor, has also refused to back away from his strict social isolation measures. So far I've been asking, now I am giving an order. Don't leave your home, Witzel told his state's 17 million residents on Monday, as he extended the shutdown in Rio for another fortnight. Witzel, a one-time Bolsonaro ally, went on to suggest the president's behaviour could land him a trial at the International Criminal Court in The Hague. Only the right-wing governors of the Amazon states of Rondônia and Roraima, both Bolsonaro allies, have followed the president's lead by relaxing restrictions on shops and businesses. In Roraima's capital Boa Vista and Rondônia's capital Porto Velho, many, but not all shops are open and there are people on the streets. Ciro Gomes, a prominent left-wing politician from northeastern Brazil, told The Guardian that in order to save thousands of lives, the country now needed, and was starting to witness, an extensive campaign of civil disobedience initiated by governors, mayors, the overwhelming majority of religious leaders, and the media. And Chris, Bolsonaro, we have discussed a wee bit on the show before. He's taken the Trump approach to the coronavirus and doubled it. He telling people it's just a case of the sniffles. It's fine. Everybody should get back to work. What do you make of this revolt by governors, mayors, by religious leaders, all telling him, we don't care what you say, we're shutting down the country?
Yeah, well, I think it's quite right for the people, or should I say the citizens, to actually take matters into their own hands if they feel that they are being put in jeopardy and undervalued, and I'm talking about undervalued as i.e. in human life, not in financially. You are quite right. The fact that he is acting like a tin pot general, very similar to Trump. Bolsonaro is not one of my favourite characters. He's from a personal point of view, he's no friend of Palestine, and he has taken some quite draconian measures on Palestinian refugees that have moved to Brazil in order to try and duck out of the troubles there. So they've been trying to get away from a lot of oppression and the I say, he is a bit of a tin pot general, and I think it would only be right that if the majority of the country decide some sort of civil disobedience in order to undermine them, and there are possible charges that could be brought in front of the Hague, then I think they should be pursued. The current crisis definitely warrants that.
Mm-hmm. And in other international news, Italy has extended its lockdown until the 13th of April, but signs are emerging that the rate of coronavirus infection both there and in Spain, the two countries that have suffered the highest global death tolls in the pandemic so far, may be reaching a plateau. Experts say we are on the right track and the drastic measures we have taken are starting to yield results, the Health Minister Roberto Speranza said. He warned, though, that it would be unforgivable to assume this was a definitive defeat of COVID-19 and said it would be a long battle. Italy's Civil Protection Authority announced yesterday that the country's tally had climbed by 837 deaths to 12,428, the highest in the world, and that the number of new confirmed cases had risen by 4,053, taking the country's total to 105,792. However, the number of infections is rising at a slower rate each day. Tuesday's increase was 4.1% more than Monday, which was 4.1% more than Sunday, which was itself 5.6% more than Saturday. 2 weeks ago, by comparison, infection rates were rising at between 3 and 4 times that rate. Spain, which crossed the threshold of 100,000 confirmed cases today and reported another record single-day death toll of 864, is following a similar pattern, with officials saying today that a trend change was starting to be seen. Between the 15th and 25th of March, new cases were growing at a rate of around 20% per day. From the 25th of March, that rate has dropped to 12% or lower. And Chris, this has got to be good news. Obviously, we're looking at a 2 week delay roughly from when the lockdown goes into effect to when we start to see these numbers dropping off. That's exactly what the epidemiologists would predict. And it does seem now that in Italy and Spain, the numbers are just starting to slow right down and hopefully level off and then go into some sort of decline. What do you think of these results today?
Well, again, the countries the likes of Italy and Spain have been slightly ahead of the curve. With regards to the UK and Ireland, we're sort of like 2 or 3 weeks behind them. So that, I think, should actually act as a stark warning not to be complacent in the weeks ahead, because obviously in the UK it's going to get worse before it gets better. With regards to Italy and Spain, obviously, any plateauing out of the actual death rate is obviously to be welcomed. But the point that I wanted to make is that, and it's not just the UK, I may be wrong and I'm happy to be corrected, but, when we're discussing the COVID-19 issue, and we always discuss the death rates and people who have contracted it and people who are in hospital with it, and the amount of wains with snotty beaks, all the rest of it. We don't actually hear anything about survival rates against. We're always getting the negative figures and not the positive figures.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if that is down to the subjected view of the right-wing media that they actually want
I think there are a couple of factors there. Firstly, obviously, it takes a wee while for recoveries to filter through. I mean, people who have been in hospital, for example, it's going to take a couple of weeks of treatment before we can say that they're recovered.
Shadow's recovered in a week, apparently.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing, is that we have so many cases that have been quite mild, where people probably have recovered, but they weren't even counted as confirmed cases.
Yeah,
so a lot of these numbers, I think, are now starting to become a wee bit blurry, simply because we've got no idea how many people have had the virus but not had it seriously, or even, as they're suggesting now, there may be thousands who have had it and had no symptoms at all. So I think all of these numbers are always going to be a wee bit fuzzy around the edges, whereas obviously the number of deaths is a pretty concrete one that we can kind of pin down quite accurately. There is other news internationally. Saudi Arabia has urged Muslims to wait before they start making plans for the Hajj for this year. At the moment, with no real clarity on when travel restrictions will be lifted, for example. They don't want to encourage people to start planning that trip, especially since obviously physical distancing at the Hajj is nearly impossible. In fact, crushing is one of the biggest risks that happens there. So that is something that needs to be looked into. But just finally, we have some news from India. And doubt has been cast over India's claim that it has no community transmission of coronavirus, after the country reported its biggest daily rise in number of cases so far, mostly connected to a religious gathering in Delhi 2 weeks ago. India reported a record increase of 386 cases in the past 24 hours, pushing the total number to 1,637, according to the country's health ministry. The death toll for the country is now at 38. In another worrying development, the first coronavirus case was also confirmed in Mumbai's Dharavi slum, which is India's largest and is home to almost 1 million people living in... Oh, and I'm sorry, we are just going to go over to the Parliament now, where that bill is due to pass. They are just voting on it just now, so we should have a result any moment. In the meantime, Chris, what do you think about this situation in India?
It's very difficult to comment.
Oh, sorry, Chris, we are going over to Holyrood now.
On motion number 21371, in the name of Michael Russell, is yes 80. There were no votes against, there were no abstentions. The motion is agreed and the Coronavirus Scotland Bill is passed.
So that is the coronavirus bill passed. Obviously, there were some amendments. We've not been able to dig into all of the detail of that here in the studio. I'm sure Gordon will discuss it in a lot more depth tomorrow night. But that has been passed by 80 votes to nil. So clearly a cross-party effort. Obviously, the chamber isn't quite full today because of the coronavirus. People are trying not to get too close to each other. So some people have absented themselves, whether because they're self-isolating or maybe they're a wee bit distant and didn't want to make the long journey without when there wasn't really any urgent need for it. This bill was probably always going to pass on a cross-party basis. But anyway, Chris, to go back to this outbreak appears to have been largely linked in India to a religious festival. A Muslim sect had this event on the 13th of March in a neighbourhood in Delhi, which they've then dispersed back to some of the other Muslim majority areas, especially around India, and that seems to have been the cause of a big spread. Now, obviously, religious festivals are going to happen, but it shows just one reason why things like East. Sorry, come back again. Sorry.
The chamber and committees can continue to undertake their crucial scrutiny role at this unprecedented time. The Bureau and the corporate body have been meeting online. The conveners group have been discussing issues remotely, and they will continue to do so over recess to look at the most effective options for both chamber and committees. Now, the Minister for Parliamentary Business assured the Bureau earlier, and I'm sure many members will have heard the Cabinet Secretary, Mr Russell, indicate at the end of the Stage 2 amendment period to the emergency bill that the government is looking again at how members' written questions over this period can be answered as promptly as possible, and at further steps ministers may take to adapt to the current circumstances. I trust that the government will use all methods available to inform Parliament of key decisions and activities to full effect during this time, including writing to committees and government-initiated questions. I know we all recognise the need for Parliament to continue to be able to hold government to account. I would draw members' attention to the service also provided by SPICE, which provides an authoritative, accurate and up-to-date source of information on all matters to do with the coronavirus. And I'm very grateful to colleagues for their assistance. I don't want to cast a pall over members. I do have powers of recall should they be required. However, we are keeping the situation under daily review, and I hope I can assure you that we'll prepare to respond however the situation resolves. And on that note, I'm going to close this meeting, and we'll meet again on Tuesday, the 21st of...
So that was just a wee statement there from Ken McIntosh on how Parliament is moving forward. They're back again. Was that next week? I think he said for one day. Moving just to go back quickly to this situation in India. Obviously, a very poor country in very large part, and very overcrowded as well. Chris, what's your feeling seeing some of what's been happening in India over the last few days?
Well, again, as I say, India's a very difficult political climate to comment on because much of what happens in India is very much suppressed by the Indian government. And they only let out what they want to let out. There are parts of India that is actually in complete lockdown, complete curfew. And I'm not talking about with relation to coronavirus, such as the controlling regimes in the various regions within India. Some of them do say that they are a law unto themselves. So I don't really take an awful lot, heart when I hear that they are, for want of a better word, COVID deniers. You mentioned the fact that India is a poor country, and I would have thought that they would have been wanting to be as proactive as possible with regards to this virus. But then I am ignorant to most of their religious ways. I understand some of them, but the majority of them, I barely understand. Obviously, I know the distinction between a Muslim and a Hindu. But it's a really difficult political climate to actually give a real 100% comment on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the saddest bit of news we heard today is that partly because this outbreak has been linked to this gathering at a mosque, there has now been a trend in Indian social media of referring to this as the Corona Jihad. The tensions between the Hindu and Muslim populations in India have been rising over the last wee while, particularly because of Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister, who is a well-known Hindu nationalist. It's deeply unfortunate if this is going to highlight or encourage religious tensions in India, which is famously, this huge secular democracy that has managed to hold together an enormous country of multiple ethnicities, multiple religions for several decades now. It's going to be really sad if something like the coronavirus can be a factor in destabilising that. But anyway, that is all we've got time for tonight. We apologise for the slight delay. It does mean, of course, that we did get to catch that final vote at Parliament. The passing of the coronavirus bill, obviously the big news there today. But we thank you very much for joining us this evening. It's always a pleasure to have an audience for these shows. It's why we make them. If you're able to support us in any way, we would be very grateful if you can go to broadcastingscotland.scot/register and sign up as a supporter. Your £5 a month will make a huge difference to what we're able to do here at Broadcasting Scotland. If you're not able to afford it, we do understand, especially right now. We know times are tough for a lot of people. So if you're not able to support us financially, then please support us online. Follow us on Twitter at Broadcast Scot. Find our page on Facebook and share the programmes around with your friends and family. Let them know what we're doing here at Broadcasting Scotland. Let them know why you watch. And hopefully, as people are looking for a wee bit of time to fill their quiet, socially isolated days at home, they can get a wee bit of something out of Broadcasting Scotland. And of course, if you'd like to get involved, then there are always roles here for almost anybody who has something to contribute, whether that's as a journalist, as an on-screen talent, or as somebody working behind cameras, working on the technical side of things. There's always work to be done here at Broadcasting Scotland, and we'd be delighted to hear from any of you who are willing to get involved. And we are in the process of developing a new afternoon programme. I don't know if how many of you were watching this afternoon, but Sam and Ruth did a great job doing a wee kind of prototype version of that show this afternoon during a break in proceedings at Holyrood. But we are intending to expand that a wee bit, to extend it a wee bit, put a wee bit more structure into it. We were just testing the waters today, and then ended up having a much longer show because Holyrood was delayed so much this afternoon. So congratulations to Sam Payton and Ruth Watson for holding the fort down this afternoon. They did a tremendous job. But that is all we've got time for tonight. So I'd just like to thank Chris McCusker once again for joining us. It's always a pleasure to chat to you, Chris. And thank you again for joining us. Gordon will be back again tomorrow at 7 with Scotland at 7 as usual. I'll be back on Sunday with the full Scottish. And until then, look after yourselves, look after each other, and have a great night.